literally the year before, a year to the date, like I said, I was a practice player, so I would like go to all the games and you would like sit in the suite and just watch. And I remember I like took a picture from the suite and my cousin like messaged me and he was just like, "Hey, when you finally play your first game on that field, like make sure you take a moment and look up to where you're sitting right now and thank God that you made it this
Wow.
far." And
Goosebumps.
literally
Yes.
a year to the day, I played my very first game.
Welcome to Champion This podcast with Brianna, Salvatore, Dueck, and Chelsea Poppens, where we share the incredible stories of athletes and entertainers who are using their platforms to create positive change in the world and the communities they live in.
Today we have Simone Charley on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey,
Simone
hey.
Simone is a professional soccer player. She currently plays forward for the Orlando Pride in the NWSL, National Women's Soccer League. She's also had an incredible tenure in the NWSL, playing for teams including the Portland Thorns FC and Angel FC, these are her other teams. She was also incredibly a two-sport athlete at Vanderbilt. I don't know how my girl had time to play two sports at the Division I level in college, but she competed in both soccer as well as triple jump for the university's track and field team, where she earned multi-time All-American accolades as well as SEC honors in both sports. In addition to being an incredible athlete, she's also passionate about impact outside of the court or field, I should say, including being an advocate for mental health awareness. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Woo! I love it. I'm excited to hear your story. Uh, so, to give our listeners a little bit better understanding of you and the path that it took to get to playing at the elite level of a professional in Orlando, can you tell us a little bit about your journey in sports and take us back to the first moment that you fell in love with sports in general?
Yeah, so I started playing soccer when I was 5, and I kind of just fell into it. I have an older brother and an older sister, and I think my sister was doing basketball at the time, my brother's doing football, and so my parents just kind of like handed me the rec calendar and was like, "Hey, all right, you can like pick a sport." And I just flipped to the soccer page and was just like, "I want to do soccer." So they're kind of like, "Why soccer?" Which to this
Yeah.
day I have no idea why, but as soon as I like stepped out on the field, I like fell in love with the sport and was just like, if I could play this forever, I will. And so, yeah, I kind of just like fell into it and then fell in love with it automatically. And then in first grade is when I started running track. Like I said, my siblings were playing other sports at the time, and my parents put us all into track because they were like, "Oh, it'll help you like stay in shape and stuff for your other sports." And so, yeah, that's
Mm.
kind of how I got started doing soccer and track.
Yeah, wow, that's wild. Also, you mentioned your sister and your brother, but these are two powerhouse athletes. Your sister was a triple jumper at Nicole at Auburn, and your older brother Miles was a triple jumper and long jumper at Troy. Not to mention your cousin Damien. Sorry, I got all the background information on you for the internet. Damien was a football player at Vanderbilt, but you are like, you come from a super athletic family. What were your family gatherings like, and like how did this how did this environment push you to be a better athlete?
Yeah, I would say definitely sports was like a huge part of our lives. I feel like our summers were always spent just traveling to track meets together. Um, but yeah, I feel like it was definitely competitive. But I wouldn't say we were necessarily competitive with each other. I feel like we've always
Mm,
been each other's like biggest cheerleaders. But I do think our competitiveness is what got us all jumping because we used to all be like sprinters and running and things. And then when my sister got to high school, her coach put her into triple jump because they were just trying to like score some more points, and she started doing pretty well. So then my brother was like, well, if Nicole's good at it, then I'm gonna do it. And then he started doing pretty well. And so then I was like, okay, well, if they're doing it, then I gotta do it. And so that's
Yes.
how we all just kind of like fell into jumping. And so yeah, and then that ended up being what we all did in college. So yeah, I would say definitely it was competitive, but I would say at the end of the day, we all would cheer each other on.
Mm, I love that. I come from a big family where there's a lot of athletes too, but it's really cool to see like the people who paved the way to make you feel like I can do it. Like if they did it, I can do it. I have a bunch of
Yeah,
aunts that did volleyball, basketball, and then it just becomes a piece, like you said, kind of like a piece of the DNA of your family and the things that you do and you know you're capable of doing. I think that's tremendous.
yeah, no, for sure.
Mm. But also, you were one of the rare two sport division college athletes. Like Bree said, I don't understand how you did two sports. That you barely being one sport athlete in college. I didn't have any time for anything. But you played both soccer and track at Vanderbilt, triple jump, and you were incredibly successful at both. What was your experience like being a two sport athlete, and how did you juggle the demands of doing both?
Yeah. Um, I loved it, but it was very challenging. I
Yeah.
feel like going into, especially my first year in college, I think for me too, I like grew up pretty much in the same neighborhood my whole life, had the same amount of friends or the same friends since I was a kid. And I remember like going off to college and having to like start fresh and like you start with the soccer season and it's like you dive 2 feet in and you're busy all the time and you're not really
Yeah.
around and having to do class and then um soccer season ends like November and then it's like okay I get a little break and then it's like okay now 2 feet in track season's going and all of that and so yeah I feel like there are definitely challenges in that way of like trying to figure out who I was outside of sports
Yeah.
and I I think that's something I struggled with was my identity outside of sports. And like while I enjoyed like competing and just the like I feel like I kind of got the best of both worlds where like soccer is a team sport and you have that
Hmm.
family aspect whereas like track it's an individual and it feels like you have more control in what you put into it you get out of it
Yeah.
I feel like you kind of have the best of both worlds that way but when you spend so much time only competing and playing sports that's how you end up seeing yourself and I think in hindsight um, honestly me as an adult now I feel like a lot of the unlearning I've had to do has been like figuring out who I am outside of the sports setting, especially someone who has spent so much time competing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, but I definitely like enjoyed my time in college, and I feel like there were definitely ups and down moments. I think the biggest shock for me was um, the Olympic trials my um, junior year. Because I think for me, that was something, you work your whole life for.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like redshirted a soccer season. And at the time, that was probably the hardest I'd ever worked for something of like,
Yeah.
I would go early and like weightlift in the morning and then train in the evening and be doing two-a-days and sacrificing so much for this one moment. And you always tell yourself, like, you give everything and it'll work out in the end and it'll pay off in the end. And like the sacrifice is only worth it if it works out. And so I think having all of that just build up and then going to the Olympic trials and not making
This
the
was for
team.
Rio, right? Rio 2016.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that shattered me.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that was definitely like a life defining moment of me beginning to figure out who I am outside of sports, but also um, I would say for me, a pinnacle part, I think, of my faith as well, because I think that's something also that's important to me. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, right? You put in all this effort. This is that childhood dream. And then, you know, you have this challenge of not being able to make it. And like, how were you able to overcome this challenge? You mentioned it being life defining and your faith as part of that, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that was a big moment for me because I guess flashback before that, I had like tried out for there's like a youth national team. It's interesting because I feel like side note, I talk a lot about track, but I feel
Yeah.
like I learned so much about myself through track because it's literally just you and the
Yeah.
track. Whereas like in soccer, there's like so many other things going on, so many other people. Um, and so anyways, I remember my freshman year, um, I had tried out for the youth national team, and it all came down to my last jump, and I missed it by a centimeter.
Oh my
And
Mm.
gosh.
Wow.
and I literally, I like, I feel like honestly, there was like a switch that like went off in my head after that of like, I never want to feel that feeling again.
Oh.
And it was very much like everything I do is like to get that 1 centimeter. So it was like, okay, I got to make sure I like don't eat this and don't eat that. I got to come early, stay late because I got to get that 1 centimeter. And so that was kind of the mind frame I was in of like obsessing over controlling everything. Because in my
Hmm.
head, like if you just do everything right, it'll work out. Um, and so then fast forward to the Olympic trials, I talked to my soccer coach. I'm redshirting a whole soccer season, which is a big deal
It's a
at the
big deal.
time. It's a
Yeah.
huge deal.
Yeah. And your coach
Um,
being supportive of that is like, wow,
yeah,
testament
Yep.
to your coach for, being on board with that.
yeah, which I had support from it honestly was our athletic director too, was a big part of that, of like wanting to make sure I had that opportunity, which I'm like incredibly grateful for him. But with that, there just comes a lot of pressure of,
Yeah.
like sitting out a soccer season, having to like rearrange your class schedule, and like, yeah, it was just felt like a lot of pressure. And in my head, I'm like, if I control and do everything right, I will make this team.
Yeah.
Um, or were you about
Did
to say something?
did the teams ever I guess did you have any like sports psychologists that were a part of the team, whether it would be track or soccer, that were did you think about talking to anybody during that time?
Yeah, so I met with a sports psychologist after starting my freshman year of college because I struggled a lot mentally that year. We had a
Hmm.
pretty tough soccer season, and when my track season had started out, um, I struggled a lot to like hit the jumps that I had been hitting in high school. And I was just like pretty frustrated with my performances. And so I had started meeting with her, and we talked a lot about just kind of like trying to let go, especially like when you're competing. Um, but I don't think I really carried that into training. I was
Yeah,
very like,
yeah.
yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Uh,
I'm gonna check all the boxes that I know I'm supposed to do.
yeah. And so, yeah, basically, like I said, trained really hard, and even it got to a pretty unhealthy place of, you build strength, and then for triple jump, you want to be really strong, but also lightweight so that you can jump far. And so it got to a point where I wasn't really eating and
Yeah.
losing weight
Hmm.
incredibly fast. But like I said, in my head, it would be worth it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, ended up going to Oregon and came down to the last jump again and got knocked out by 2 inches.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
Brutal.
What a
and
roller coaster.
so, yeah, but all that to say, I know you'd asked about the faith part.
Yeah.
I think for me, going back to my identity essentially being tied up in sports, and I think having that big failure and feeling like a failure. I already pretty much struggled a lot with anxiety, um, because, yeah, I think for me, just growing up, social anxiety was something that I struggled a lot with, especially I was like picked on a lot growing up as a kid. And I think with my identity being tied in sports, if sports weren't going well, then it's like, who am I?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and so it got to a point where I just like wasn't really like leaving my dorm room and not really um, wanting to like be in public and see people. And I think me and my best friend at the time had both kind of hit a pretty low moment. And
Mm,
so we were just kind of like, hey, like we'd already been going to FCA, which is Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Yeah.
yep.
Um, but we were like just kind of going through the motions. And like I grew up in church, so I know how to say all the right things and like answer all the questions. But we were like, how about we like do it for real this time and like actually like really get to know God and spend time in the Word. And I feel like that was the first time I experienced like a change on the inside.
Yeah.
And I feel
Mm,
like that was when I actually like got serious about my faith and realized that, um, yeah, you really can like, there's a difference. And I feel like that was a pivotal moment for me.
mm, mhm. There's so much power in giving it up to God. And I think, like, I know Brie and I are of faith. Um, as athletes, we're like you kind of said, we think it's all in our control. And the more that we control, the more that impacts our outcome and our success. And then once you start to build that relationship in your faith and in with God, you understand the power of leaving the control up to something unseen. And like it's really cool to like have those experiences and see it for yourself and feel it for yourself, because it really is like it could be very toxic when you're only leaning on yourself. And and when you start building that faith and that relationship with God, it really changes you.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And so switching gears, sorry,
You're good. Go ahead.
switching gears a little bit to your soccer career. Did you always? I know we've talked a lot about track,
Yeah.
but did you always know that you wanted to go pro, or like how did you end up making the decision to go pro?
Yeah. Yeah, I talked a lot about track, but I do love soccer, obviously.
And you're
And
pretty
I
good at it too,
Yeah.
being in the NWSL, freaking rock star.
um no, but I feel like soccer was always um my favorite and my like something I knew that I wanted to do. I feel like track was something I did because I had the opportunity to, and that I had done pretty well at it. So I was like, okay, I'll keep doing it. But I feel like my passion was always soccer, and that was always what I wanted to do professionally.
Hmm.
So cool. Well, let's talk about the moment when you first suited up for your first game. So, your first professional soccer game was with the Portland Thorns in 2019. Talk to us about stepping on the field in your jersey and essentially having made it, achieving your dream.
Yeah, that moment was a really special moment for me. So flashback to 2018, I didn't get drafted out of college. The Thorns coach at the time just called my soccer coach and was like, "Hey, you can come try out, but like we can't guarantee you anything." And so I went out to Portland. I tried out for the team, and I didn't make it the first year. And so I just lived with the host family, worked a whole bunch of odd jobs, and continued training. And it wasn't until the following year in preseason that I made the team. Um, and so I would say like our first home game specifically was special because, um, well, first it was like the opening of like Providence Park. They had like just expanded the stadium, and it was like going to be a packed house. But it was actually crazy because, um, literally the year before, a year to the date, I had, as I like I said, I was a practice player, so I would like go to all the games, and you would like sit in the suite and just watch. And I remember I like took a picture from the suite and like posted it on Instagram, like on my story or something like that, and just like said something about the game. And my cousin like messaged me and he was just like, "Hey, when you finally play your first game on that field, like make sure you take a moment and look up to where you're sitting right now and thank God that you made it this
Wow.
far."
Mm.
And
Goosebumps.
literally
Yes.
a year to the day, I played my very first game for the Thorns, and like it was like an incredible moment of just like all the hard work paying off. And yeah, it was just like a really long time coming of a lot of
Yeah.
training and not knowing if I would make the team. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's go. God
I
will
love
do it. That's amazing.
Yeah. I love those full circle moments. Um,
Yeah.
but throughout your career, you've actually played with some insanely legendary players, including Christine St. Clair, Crystal Dunn, Julie Ertz, and among others. Did any of these players leave a particular mark on you as a player or impact your current leadership style?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, yeah, I think it's been really cool. I feel like I've been able to play with some players I've looked up to like my whole life. I think Crystal Dunn was like a big one because I loved watching her play. Because at the time too, there weren't a lot of black players on the national team, and she was one of like the young guns making a name for herself.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say a big one would be Tobin Heath. I think when I
Mm.
got to the
Yeah.
Thorns,
Legend.
she went out of her way of like taking me under her
Mm,
wing, and just like I think back to 2018, and like I said, I'm fresh out of college. I tried out, I did not make the team, and
Yeah.
I essentially cried my way through 2018, if I'm being honest.
We all have those
And
seasons. I get it. Yeah.
I don't know where I was, but I probably was too.
Yeah.
and she would always check in on me and make sure I was okay. Or if I was staying late after training, she'd give me pointers, or I'd see her do like some crazy move that she just casually pulls out. And I'm like, how do you do that? And she would like
Yeah.
help me out. Like she would always like just support me. Or if I'm struggling, or if she sees me crying in the locker room for the 30th time, like she would come and check on me. And so I would say Tobin Heath for sure. Like that
Mm,
that was my girl. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Shout out to Tobin. So sweet. I love that. I know, yeah, there have been some incredible women's basketball players in my life too that have really just like seen the potential in me and also really been a champion of my success as well. And like the way that that has fueled me to give back to the next generation, even outside of the court now is huge. You know, you pay it forward. But and I'm sure Simone, that you're doing that for your teammates now and getting to kind of shepherd them as they enter the league or, you know, help them achieve their full potential too.
mhm.
Uh,
I think it's also, I mean, to our listeners, check in on your friends.
Mm,
Also, I think as we get older, we forget to that relationships and friendships are a two-way street. And so you expect to be
mm,
checked in on and you don't always actively think about checking in on other people. But like when I have a
mm,
friend give me a call just to see how I'm doing or see what's up, like I was like that means something to me. Like I love that someone actively like I cross their mind and they're just like, what's Chelsea doing? Like just I
mm,
don't know. I love the people that go above and beyond to just share some kindness.
yeah.
agreed.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
It's been awesome to see too the insane growth of the NWSL over the last in 5 years in particular, 4 years, alongside this wave and rising tide of women's sports. But NWSL in particular has now expanded from 9 teams in 2020 to 14 teams in 2024 and plans to expand to 16 teams by 2026. We've also seen TV viewership increase year over year. This year we had a new CBA signed. A lot of
What? Let's
a lot of big moves.
go.
Yes. But how has that experience been for you? Seeing that fandom change, seeing the new excitement around women's soccer. What's it been like as a player?
Yeah, it's been really cool. It's been a whirlwind. I feel like even just even talking to players now in the league, and I'm like, you guys don't understand like what it was like back in my day.
Yeah.
Like which has been really cool of just seeing the growth of the league in a short period of time. I think especially on the like player welfare side, I think as like our players association, that's something that we fought a lot for in our CBA, and like making sure there's minimum staff requirements, minimum requirements for like training facilities and things like that. But also just seeing the growth in investment and just
Mhm.
seeing the fruit of that. Like have it used to be like the Thorns were the team that like would get all the support, and now it's
Yeah.
like no, you have the Thorns, you have Angel City, you have San Diego, you have
Yeah.
Spirit, like, and it shows that like when you invest in women's sports, like people come,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
like you market, people come, like, and that
You put
shouldn't
it
be a
on TV,
foreign
people
concept. You put it,
watch.
Yep.
Hello. I don't have
hello.
to go search for it on some random like Facebook stream that a fan live streamed at a game. I can actually like
Yep.
literally watch it on TV. Oh, wow. How novel. People tune in.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so it's been cool just seeing like I feel like women's sports too is like having a moment, and I feel like
Yes.
this momentum is like carrying, and I'm excited to see the staying power that I know it's going to have.
Yes.
Yes.
Um but yeah, it's just been crazy even just like thinking about like salaries, like we used to have like a max salary, and now like our league minimum is more than what the max was when I was like just started playing. And
Hmm.
so it's like,
Wow.
yeah, it's like
What is the
it's been
max?
really
Can I ask?
exciting. Now,
Yeah.
we now don't have maxes. So you
Good.
Oh,
can now get
Make your money,
paid
girl.
whatever.
what was it
Yes.
before?
Oh, guys. It
Two-
was in 2018 like 40,000
oh
is the max.
gosh.
And
Yeah.
teams would like pay for your housing, and so that's kind of how they would like
Get around
make
that.
it feel like a real
Oh.
job.
Yeah.
um but yeah, luckily we're
Mm.
past
We are
that.
past that, girl.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. So, Simone, you talked about a little bit about this new collective bargaining agreement, but it's very historic for our listeners. In August of this year, NWSL and NWSL Players Association agreed to the new CBA, which basically will now eliminate the draft, guarantee contracts, and grant unrestricted free agency to all players. This is like a literal game changer for soccer, and I think might even be the first sports team that's literally eliminated a draft. But what are your new thoughts on this CBA? Yeah,
Yeah, we were pretty stoked about it. I think um things like guaranteeing players contracts and making sure that players can't be traded without their consent is big. Like if you
ooh,
sign with a team, they should have like you it's a mutual contract, and so they
yeah,
shouldn't be able to just trade you away. You guys agreed to 2 years, 3 years, however long, and it should have to be honored.
agreed.
um and so that one was huge, and then also guaranteeing players contracts, so then
Hmm.
you can't just be cut in the middle of the season. If you sign for a year, then that you're on the team for a year, which
Yes,
is just normal for a regular job. So I don't understand why
right.
that like
Yeah.
exists for in the sports world. But I think a big one was eliminating the draft, which, yes, we are the first like American sports league to do that. And I think
Yeah,
for us, one of the big reasonings behind that is, well, one, soccer is a global game. And if we want to continue to be one of the best leagues in the world, we can't continue to be limited by like American rules, essentially,
mm,
because no other professional soccer league has a draft. That does not
Mm.
exist. And there have been
Got it.
instances where
Interesting.
players have gotten drafted by teams that they don't feel like is necessarily a good fit for them. And so because
Oh,
that team owns their rights, they can't play for another team in the league. And so those players go and play overseas. And we've seen that countless times
Oh,
where we've had quality players who could be in the NWSL now going and playing in other leagues because they don't have the right to choose where they play.
yeah.
And so,
interesting. Yeah.
and with that, the hope too is that by players now owning their rights out of college, now teams are going to have to do a better job of making sure they're investing in player welfare because
Yep.
a player's not going to want to play for your club if you don't treat players right, if your training
Yeah,
facilities aren't trash, if you're training on
for
turf. Like,
sure.
no one wants that. And so
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
the hope is to like this forces teams to now level up and elevate their treatment of players because that's the only way that you're going to get players to come play for your club. And so, yeah, for us, it was all about making sure making sure clubs are actually investing in players and making sure that players are also seeing the benefits of investments and not just on Saturday
Yeah.
with like fans on the weekend, but no, what are your training facilities like and what is the day to day
Yes.
player experience like?
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
And we just talked to Boston Nash Bar. Is that correct? How I'm saying it right, Bree?
I think it's Nakbar.
Nakbar, Boston Nakbar, about his CBA for the EuroLeague Players Association and how
mm-hmm.
players need a voice. And but it's so important for players to have a voice in those spaces because it goes back to the mentality of like being being cut the next day or not knowing your timeline of things and not being able to set a plan for yourself. It goes into the anxiety, depression, just living in fear sometimes because like one game of not playing well could affect your entire season,
Mm.
or getting cut the next day. So I think it's so important to protect players in that way.
100%. And to your point too, also other leagues like other professional soccer leagues, like getting cut, trades, all of that does not exist. And so it's like once again we're like limited by these rules that disadvantage
Yeah.
players. Why would people want to play here when you
Yeah.
can get traded, when you can get cut? Like what?
Yeah.
That doesn't
Hmm.
even make sense. So,
Totally. And on the
yeah.
global scale, because the rules, it's more of like a player transfer, right? Like, is it the same on the
Yeah.
women's side where they're paying like, however much? Eventually, it'll be 40 million for Simone's rights or whatever. Give us
Yeah.
another 1 or 2 years, and that will be your contract.
Hey, I
But
received
yeah,
that.
what is yeah, it's quite different, right?
Yeah, so there's not trades, there's transfers. So you
Hmm.
can like be transferred to another team, and the club that you're being transferred to has to like pay your club a certain amount. They have to agree on that fee, and you have a say on your transfer. You can't just like
Yeah.
be
Hmm.
transferred randomly and you didn't know. Like that's
Yeah.
Yep.
not a thing.
Good.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, and then same as far as like being cut, like that's not a thing. And you could also go out on loan, but once again, that's like a mutual agreement. And most of the time, it's, oh, we want you to get more playing time. You might not play here.
Yeah.
We'll let you go on loan to another team so
Hmm.
that you can play more. But once again, you agree to that. They don't just like
Interesting.
send you out to a random team. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
That's huge.
that's crazy. Uh, but kind of going back to that mentality, how would you say that you handled the pressure of being, or handle the pressure of being a professional soccer player, and how important is the mindset to being successful at that elite level?
ooh, yeah. I think it's definitely something that I've had to work on, I think, because I think with once you become professional, I feel like originally you are like so excited and like I reached my dream and all of that, but then it's like, okay, but now I'm here and this is actually just the starting line, you know? And
Hmm.
then you're like, okay, now I like just want to play, and then you start playing, and then you're like, okay, well now I want to start, and then I want to score a goal, and it just continues to climb. And I feel like for me, especially early in my career, like I said, I had um, tried out and I didn't make it. And so I feel like I hopped on that treadmill early of like, if I could just make the team, I'll be happy. And then like, okay, now I just want to play. Now I want to start, and kind of like went on that cycle. And I think one thing that I've had to learn is a lot of just letting go and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that um, playing from a place of learning how to play from a place of not having to prove myself or prove anything, but playing from a place of knowing who I am and knowing what I bring to the
Mm.
table. And I feel like that's when I've played my best soccer, isn't when I'm trying to
Yes.
prove to you that I should be playing, or proving to you that I'm good enough, or proving to this person that I deserve this, or even trying to prove to myself that I'm good enough. It's like, no,
Yeah.
when I know who I am and I know the quality that I bring and that I'm enough just because I'm here, that's when I play my best soccer. And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like for me, dealing with pressure has turned a lot, or for me, pressure felt a lot like trying to prove myself to other people and prove myself to myself.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn that no, I'm enough. And
Yes.
Yes,
that's
you
all
are.
That is so good. Yes. And there's just such a freedom that comes with that as well. Like when you're out on the field and you are confident in who you are and you're not doing it to please other people or to win the approval or to feel worthy as a human, the ability to go out there and do your thing and like live into who you've been made to be is just like it's crazy. It's so magical, it's so fun, it's so freeing. Honestly, a good reminder too, because I think even, off the court in the working world as well, like as I've been in starting my own company, there can be a temptation to want to do things so that you can get approval from other people or be seen as successful or whatever. But being confident in like who you are and what God has for you is just the way to go. And it like really dissipates stress when you're in it, and it's just there's nothing better. There's yeah, it's the best.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, Simone, you also, speaking of kind of handling some of that pressure and mindset and overcoming challenges, you recently have just recovered from a torn Achilles injury. But how has this journey really, how have you embraced this journey? You've been through challenges before, and how has it also helped you to see yourself as more than an athlete?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I tore my left Achilles last season, in our second game of the year. And
Mm.
then as I was coming back from my left Achilles, I was 11 months post-op and was just starting back team training. It was like my first week back of team training, and that's when I tore my right Achilles. And that was like a week before the season started. So it's been like a crazy 2 years or like year and a half of like, honestly, this has been the most time I've not played soccer since I started playing soccer at 5.
Mm.
And I feel like it's been a lot of reflection of what I want my career to look like. I feel like there's like
Yeah.
pre Achilles Simone, and then there's going to be post Achilles
Oh yeah.
Simone. um,
God's reworking you.
yeah, oh yeah. And yeah, I feel like I my hope is to bring more joy, I think, to the game, because I
Yes.
think I've played a lot of my career with just heavy expectation and demands of myself and
Mm,
pressure on myself and wanting to accomplish this and this and
yeah.
this and just being hard on myself. And I think
Yeah.
going back to the whole proving, feeling like I have to prove things to people, and realizing that I am enough already. And I feel like I was kind of getting into that flow when I was playing, coming back from my left Achilles.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something I definitely want to continue. Um, but I also think it's brought a lot of just perspective of just like who I am not as a soccer player, because I've gotten to spend a lot of time with non-soccer playing Simone and realizing things that I'm passionate about, and also that like soccer is amazing, but it's not that serious, and like there's more to life than the game, and that's great. And so I
Yes.
feel like it's just brought a lot of perspective of there's more to life than this game that has felt like it's driven my life and at times consumed my life.
Preach. I had a similar experience to you with knee injuries back to back, taking me out of playing in my
Mm.
dreams, and so it kind of crafts the question that I asked of you right now is like how is faith showing up in this moment for you? What does that
Ooh.
look like?
Ooh.
And I asked for
That's a
my own
real
personal
question.
experience because I know how it showed up for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
I mean,
Us and our knee
Humbling.
injuries.
I'm like, Lord, I already learned this lesson. Wow. I'm on freaking surgery number 4 on the same knee. Come on, I
Oh
got
yeah.
it. Why
mm,
again? But yeah, no, there's purpose in it.
yeah. No, that's real. I feel like I've been on this like wave of like, we were literally just talking about this in Bible study yesterday. But it was interesting. I think when I tore my first Achilles, I was like, it didn't take long for me to be like, okay, I actually think to see the positive, like I think this is good for me, like I'm getting space from soccer. And I think at the time I really needed that. Because that season, the previous season, the 2022 season had just been really challenging mentally.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think when I tore my right one, and that one originally was really hard to swallow because literally exactly what you said. I'm like, did I not learn this lesson like
Literally, you're like,
already?
this
Like
is deja vu. This is round 4
literally,
of the same thing. Yeah.
yeah,
You're like, Lord, I get it.
yeah. I was like, I get it. I'm more than a soccer player. Okay, anyway, like, can
Right.
I play again? And but I feel like recently, one thing I've been talking to my teammates, we have a Bible study,
I love
and I
that.
feel like it's becoming very apparent to me. You know, in the Bible, and it talks about like running the race and how like
Yep.
shake off every weight that's like slowing you down.
Yes.
Yeah. First Corinthians 9:24 through
Wait,
27.
My girl literally
wait, that's
has that
awesome.
I have it
tatted on her
printed on me.
body.
Wait, that's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's what I leaned on during my time.
Yeah, literally. I've been like sitting and just thinking about that, and I feel like it's become really apparent to me that I've been running the wrong race. And I
Mm,
feel like the race that I've been running is that of achievement, wanting to like, I want to achieve this goal in soccer and I want my career to look like this, and like
yeah.
it'll make the sacrifice worthwhile if I do this, and like running that race full speed
Yeah.
when that race has no eternal value at all.
Yeah.
And like I'm gonna die one day. We all
Mm,
are. Even if you live to your 100, like in the grand scheme of eternity, that's not that long.
yeah.
And like the things that actually matter of like loving people well, showing up for people, supporting people, like relationships, like
Yeah.
those are the things that actually have eternal weight. Like God, when I die, isn't gonna like bring up my soccer stats, you know?
No.
Yep. He's like, remember
Like
that game?
he was like, yeah, you went
Like, are you
crazy in that
sure?
game.
He might be. No, just kidding.
But yeah, and I feel like I'm realizing
Ooh.
how I've
I was
been.
like, do you think he's going to show you your highlight reel that has nothing to do with any of the of those things?
Yeah, literally a highlight reel, but not soccer.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just like, yeah, I feel like I'm realizing how I've been running the wrong race. And that for me, I'm like, there's only one race that actually has eternal value. And like, that's the
Mhm.
race I need to be running. And so I feel like that's just like become really clear that like the effort that I've been putting into this like worldly race is pretty futile. And
Yeah.
that's the effort I should be putting into the race that actually matters. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that's something that I've been thinking a lot about.
And for our
Amen.
listeners, I'll just kind of say that verse that we're referring to. I looked it up while we were there. But I was like, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. That's
Mic
the
drop.
quote.
We love that. So
Yeah,
good.
Yes.
yeah.
Well, Simone, another thing this podcast is about, it's called Champion This, and we're really bringing on champions, highlighting a lot of the impact work that they're doing. And you are incredible and clearly are sharing joy and light all over the place. One thing you've expressed you're really passionate about is that mental health advocacy and awareness. How do you think we can continue to destigmatize mental health challenges and yeah, what is still left to be done?
Ooh. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just talking about it and being very open about it, which I feel like has been happening more now. Um, but I feel like, yeah, I think a lot of times people struggle in silence, and that's part of the issue
Mm,
is that a lot of people have mental health problems, mental health issues, but don't talk about it. And
yeah.
so I feel like when people are struggling in silence, there's like a lot of shame around it and it like
Yeah.
makes it a lot worse. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I think just making sure that when we are struggling, we're very open about it. But even like casual conversations about like, yeah, I go to therapy or I talk to somebody, like that's fine and you should. And like encouraging wanting to grow in your mental health and like wanting to have healthy mental health. So, yeah, I feel like just normalizing that conversation is big.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there it's become so standard for when somebody asks you how you are, you say I'm good, just as
Mm,
default. And a lot of times, like there's a time and a place, but it's also okay to say you're not good.
yeah.
Yeah,
You're like, I'm like not great this week. And you don't even need an explanation, but just
Yeah.
being like sitting in your truth and where you're at and being honest about it, I think it hits a mark for a lot of people to
For
talk about the
sure.
things they go through.
a
I
hundred
love
percent.
that, Chels. Yeah. Especially today's social media era.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, look at how great I am. Look at
I'm
my
doing
Instagram
great.
page. Everything's
Yeah,
amazing. Look at my
Cries in
LinkedIn.
fetal
I just
position
got
at night.
promoted. You never ever put on LinkedIn when you're like fired or you didn't get a deal. Same with Instagram. People aren't like, oh yeah, it's rare to get the kind of tougher sides of life in
Hmm.
today's in the way that the world is set up today, being so digital first. But yeah, it is important to talk about the challenges, talk about, your therapist and all those things. So I love that, Simone, and I love how you champion that topic. It's so important.
Hmm.
yeah. And I think too to that point of like social media just having a highlight reel of all your greatest accomplishments, I feel like too as an athlete as well, it's like you don't talk about it as often because you don't want to sound weak and or that you're not prepared or that you're not mentally ready. And so I think that's like another stigma that needs to be um, debunked, not debunked. What's the
Yeah.
word
Hmm.
I'm looking
Yeah.
for? But dropped or whatever.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like I think as athletes we struggle too, and that's
Yes.
fine. and we should talk about it, and that doesn't make you weak. Um, and it's interesting too because I feel like especially with sports, it's more mental than physical,
Mm-hmm.
but
100%.
we don't train the mental like we do the
Yep.
physical,
Yep.
and we don't talk about the mental side either. And so, yeah, I think that's another big thing of athletes need to talk about it more.
90% mental, 10% physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I agree with that. I agree that everybody, I think Emily Ryan from Iowa State just shared her mental battle on Iowa State's social platform, and it was very powerful to see what athletes at that age go through in college, and to hear firsthand somebody's story, even your story, I think has so much power and is going to impact so many people. And the more that people are being vulnerable, the more other people are going to share their vulnerability. And like you said, it's not a weakness to stand in your truth and where you're at. But I think that kind of takes us into advice for our listeners too. We always like to end the show with asking you guys as our guests, do you have any advice for our listeners regarding achieving their full potential and using their giftings to share love and light and make the world a better place?
Ooh. I would say do what you enjoy doing and do it from that place because I feel like a lot of times, especially as a young person, you can, whether that's playing a sport because you feel like you should, or um, continue like competing to prove something to someone. I feel like you should go after your own goals and your own dreams and do your best in that. And then using that platform, that's how you can shed love and light. So I feel like just focusing on it, figuring out what it is that you want to do and give your best effort. And I would say that's the biggest thing.
That's
Beautiful.
great.
Love, love, love. Okay, so you have made it to our lightning round.
Pew, pew, pew.
So these are quick questions, answering in 30 seconds. We'll give a little leeway, but are you ready?
Yes.
Okay,
Dun dun
let's
dun.
go. Who's the toughest competition you faced on the soccer field?
Ooh. Team or person?
Person.
Oh.
Individual. Call him out now.
Who's a really good defender? Casey Kruger's a really good defender. He's tough.
Okay, nice, nice.
Ooh,
Love.
good. All right. Second question. What is your most epic soccer moment?
Ooh. I would say my first game professional at Providence Park because that was just kind of a dream come true. And I got 2 assists in that game, so it also
Let's
made it
go.
a double dream come true.
Yeah.
We love that. Pad those stats, baby. Okay, cool. Next question. What's your favorite pregame hype song?
Ooh.
Or
Anything
like
by,
of the month? I know it changes, but like right now,
yeah.
what's your major hype song? Favorite hype song?
I feel like you can't go wrong with anything by Andy Mineo. I feel like he doesn't miss.
He is a
Mhm.
vibe. Tell me why literally this morning before our call, I was vibing to Andy. I'm like, oh, he's got some new songs.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me why the song that came to mind for me is like, "We ready." What? What?
Good one.
Last question. You ready? Drum roll. If if you could get dinner with any person in history, who would it be and why?
Jesus, I have some
Oh, I feel
questions.
like that's a default. You can't do
Yeah, it's got to be
that.
someone other
That's a
than
cop out.
Jesus. Jesus is a great one. We
I
love.
know.
Yes, we approve, but
You'll meet him someday.
Ooh, someone in history.
Or it could be future,
Or someone in the
past, present,
future.
future, past, future. I think. Yeah.
I feel like I'm trying to think someone I don't I feel like I'm a big Issa Rae fan. I feel like she would be fun to get dinner with.
Oh,
So,
low
not much
key, yes, she
historical
would be
significance,
great.
but I feel like that would be a fun dinner.
Mm.
Yeah. If you don't know Issa Rae, she was the president in the Barbie movie. Absolute girl boss.
What would you talk about?
I loved her series Awkward Black Girl. It was like a YouTube series before she like blew up and made Insecure. I feel like she just like does an awesome job of like showing the complexities of being a black woman. Like you don't have to fit into a stereotype. You're like
Mm-hmm.
we're not a monolith. We're different. And
Mm,
so I feel like she does a great job of just like showing that.
Mm.
love that. It's awesome. Well, Simone, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We loved having you. For our listeners out there, we're going to link Simone's social media profiles to the show notes. Please follow along, like, share this podcast so we can get Simone's story out there. And yeah, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure.